Welcome back to Screencast 3 for Read 511, Week 4. Who knew this topic could be so exciting that we're going to have 3 screencasts about it? Anyway, abstract. So we're talking about abstract. The elements of the abstract as part of your proposal, essentially it's a concise statement of the research hypothesis and the research questions. A statement should include the expected number and characteristics of the participants, a brief summary of procedure or the way the data will be collected, and then a brief statement of how you will analyze results. The abstract, if you've ever written one, and you probably have written them for paper, is actually really hard to write because it's supposed to be so concise. I know often when I'm looking for an article to read, or I'm looking for a particular study, I go to the abstract first because I'm not going to read the whole paper to decide if it's something that I want. And so that abstract really has to include all of the most relevant and important information to make me want to continue to read it or select it to use. It usually follows on right from the title, and it works to set out your piece of work contextually, right? So like I said, it really encourages the reader to want to take a look further, and you want to have keywords in there that's going to kind of provoke their interest and their curiosity. So you usually write it, even though it's kind of like lesson design, right? So when you plan a lesson, I always tell students or teachers to have your objective, go ahead and write your whole lesson, and then come back and talk about kind of what the anticipatory set's going to be and what the purpose of the lesson was. So you fill in those pieces after you've seen the whole thing. Well, the abstract is the same way. You write the whole proposal out, and then you go back and you write the abstract because you want to really conceptually understand how the whole study is laid out to then be able to extract the most important pieces of information. So you usually write it after the work has been, the whole proposal has been done, or when you're doing your research study and you want to publish it, you write the abstract after you've completed the study, like when it's ready for publication. It's the last thing that you do. So they're usually this brief summary, about 300 words or so. You want to make sure you include that research question, kind of why you're doing the study, the hypothesis, if that makes sense, the design, and what your expected findings. And so you also want to make sure that it has it follows your title, and your title is a good title that catches people's attention, because then after the title, if the title is good enough for them to keep looking at your proposal or to evoke interested feelings when somebody's reviewing your proposal, then that abstract is kind of the next layer of how you're going to sell it. In some proposals, it's optional. I've actually always had to put it in to the proposals that I've submitted to the IRBs I have submitted to. It's definitely required once your study is completed and you want to submit it for publication. But in terms of your proposal, sometimes it's optional. Like I said, I've really never had that experience of it being optional. All right, so those are all of the pieces of the proposal that you really need to know about. Like I said, you're not going to be writing an entire proposal. You are going to be just doing the literature review. And so the literature review for your purposes for this class is a little bit different, because you're coming up with a research question that's not necessarily intended to fill the gap in the existing knowledge, in the existing literature, because you're not doing any research. So the questions that you have should be able to be answered based on you analyzing and synthesizing the existing literature. So I saw questions when I took a look at the Padlet. I saw, let me open it up right now and you can take a look at those. All right, so I opened up, unfortunately I can't change the size of my screen that I'm recording in, so we'll just look at a few. So if you take a look up at the example over here that I gave you, what is the effect of pre-reading vocabulary instruction on 6th graders' grades in science and social studies? Likely I can go out there and I can find enough studies that were already done, and I'm going to be able to synthesize the literature that's out there and what is the relationship between the lexicon level of books and ninth grade students choose for outside reading and the scores they earn on their ELA. Right, so this would be something that you may or you may not be able to find enough existing research because it's very specific in terms of ninth graders, but this is definitely a question that you could take and you could make broader and you could answer it from the existing literature. So you could change this to what is the relationship between the lexicon level of the high school core curriculum and ELA scores. So you could change it to make it a little broader. This one's a little specific. Let's see. Okay, does introducing a broad-based experience with technology education to K2 students considerably impact the learner long term? So if you were using that question, you would go and you would look for studies that did like meta-analysis or followed students for a long time. Like a longitudinal study followed students, let's say from pre-K to fourth or fifth grade, and let's say they were in a pre-K program that used a lot of technology to see if those students outperformed any other students. You can probably find some studies that support the idea that this would indeed be true or not true, because there's probably enough literature out there. So you guys will find here you go, Heather's. This is you can't see the whole thing, but this is definitely one that you could answer from the existing literature. Do literacy skills in an ELL student's home language correlate with faster development of literacy skills in English, right? And I can tell you the answer, and that's yes, right? But you can find tons of studies that would support that. And so you're just seeking to go out and find the research. You're not seeking to actually do the research. So think about that as you're narrowing down your questions this week. You want to look at the question that you're ultimately going to select and think, is this the kind of question that requires a study? Like, do I have to go out there and do this research? Or is this the kind of question that I can learn the answer to by doing research of other folks' research? Do you see the difference there? So, think about that as you're looking at your questions, and I will obviously think about that as I look at the questions that you've turned in this week, because you'll start to, this happens every time I teach 511, is that folks pick a question, they go out, and they start looking for articles, and they go, there's no articles on this, and I say, well, yeah, but that's part of the process, right? There was no articles on this, so you weren't going to find it. That would be a great thing to write a proposal about and do the study yourself, because you've obviously identified a gap in the literature. But we're not seeking to identify the gap in the literature. We are seeking to go ahead and find out more about what's already out there, and so answer a question for ourselves. So both are purposes for doing a literature review, and we talked about that, or Dr. Manzo talked about that a little bit last week with you. So that is it for week 4. So go ahead and make sure that you check on the checklist and see what else you need to get completed for this week. Have a great week.